My parents did an incredible job of helping me build healthy associations with money. It wasn't just about learning numbers, it was about understanding how balance and intentionality shaped our financial lives. Those early lessons set me up for success and helped me navigate the real world with more confidence when it came to money. And it's a big reason why I'm so excited to share today's sponsor with you, Acorns Early. Acorns Early is a smart money app and a debit card for kids that helps them learn the value of money. Kids can spend what they earn with their very own debit card. They'll love the new sense of independence and getting to choose from 35 plus customizable card designs. Plus, parents can keep track of where and when their kids are spending. You can get real-time spend notifications, set your kids' spending limits, and instantly block lost or stolen cards. They might not realize it now, but starting to invest early is going to have a huge impact on their financial future. And the best part? It's simple. And Acorns Early is such a smart, accessible tool to do that. If you're looking for a way to make a real difference in the financial future of the younger people in your life, Acorns Early is an amazing place to start. Ready to help your kids learn the value of money? Just head to acornsearly.com/diaries or download the Acorns Early app to get started. Sign up now and your first month is on us. T&Cs apply. Monthly subscription fee starting from $5 per month unless canceled.
Summer is right around the corner. If you know me, you know it's not really my favorite season for a lot of reasons that I won't get into. Something I can get into, though, is that the folks at Mint Mobile say that getting a summer bod is out and getting your savings bod is in. This spring and summer, Mint Mobile wants to see your skimpy wireless bills and fat wallets. Premium wireless plans for just $15 a month. You can have both without breaking a sweat or the bank. Say bye to your overpriced wireless plans with jaw-dropping monthly bills and unexpected overages. Mint Mobile is going to rescue you. All Mint Mobile plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. The best part is that you can use your own phone with any Mint Mobile plan and bring your phone number along with you. Ditch overpriced wireless and get 3 months of premium wireless service from Mint Mobile for $15 a month. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get your summer savings and shop premium wireless plans at mintmobile.com/diaries. That's mintmobile.com/diaries. Upfront payment of $45 for 3-month 5 GB plan required, equivalent to $15 a month. New customer offer for 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Morning decisions. A creamy mocha frappuccino drink? A sweet vanilla? Maybe a smooth caramel? Or that white chocolate mocha? Whichever you choose, delicious coffee awaits. Start your day with bottled Starbucks Frappuccino drinks. Pick up a bottle near you wherever you buy your groceries.
Welcome to the Murder Diaries. I'm Natalie.
And I'm Paige. If you want to listen ad-free, make sure you pop over to our Patreon, patreon.com/themurderdiariespod.
By the time Anne Franquemont graduated from high school, she had traveled more than most people do in a lifetime. One of 2 children of archaeologist and anthropologist parents, her family was always on the move. From New England to Peru to Japan and back to the States and New York again. Young Molly was seeing parts of the world that a lot of us still haven't gotten around to on our travel bucket list. It's no wonder she could speak 3 languages by the time she was 14. And in a sort of tragic irony, it would be yet another relocation in her life that would eventually lead to Molly's mysterious disappearance. Searching for opportunity and a plan to figure out what to do with the rest of her life, Molly packed her bags in 2000 and moved to Sunnyvale, California, a bedroom community on the outskirts of the San Francisco Bay Area. But things didn't go so well for Molly out west. She struggled with finances, mental health issues, specifically depression, and she eventually found herself in a problematic living situation. Then on March 9th, 2013, Molly disappeared into thin air. When nobody had heard from her for a while, Molly's sister Abby went to California to figure out what happened to her. It was in Sunnyvale that Abby discovered a few months before Molly went missing, she began renting a room from a man named Glenn Griggs. Abby also learned that Griggs was a violent individual and that Molly had been scared for her life in the days and weeks leading up to her disappearance. So what happened to Anne Franquemont? The smart, loving, sensitive daughter, sister, and mom? Was there something sinister at play in those final days before Molly vanished? A nefarious and evil force that, intervened in her life? Did the police do all that they could have done to solve Molly's disappearance? Molly was adored by her family. They remember a very compassionate, very giving person who was still trying to find herself. So where did Molly Anne Franquemont go? This is her story.
Used to think it's in my head, but I'm walking with the dead.
Molly Anne Franquemont was born on April 26, 1975, in Massachusetts to Ed and Chris Franquemont, who were both archaeologists and anthropologists. The youngest of two children, Molly was close to her sister Abby, who was 3 years older than Molly. 8 months after she was born, her parents moved the family to Peru, splitting their time between South America and New England. By the time she was 14, Molly's family had moved again, this time to Japan, where her mom Chris was working on a research assignment. Exposed to diverse international cultures at a young age, Molly was speaking 3 languages in her early teens. She was also a very artistic girl and had an incredible green thumb. Molly graduated from middle school in Japan, and shortly thereafter, the family returned to the United States and settled in Ithaca, New York. It was in Ithaca that Molly graduated from high school. And just a few short years after that, she gave birth to a daughter of her own, who we'll call Kira in today's episode. There was no shortage of love for Kira. Molly adored her. Every summer, Molly would take Kira to a family reunion, held annually at Lake Bonaparte in upstate New York. While there, Molly was fond of hanging out with her cousin Christine, who was also close with Molly's sister Abby. Kira loved these reunions because it meant she got to spend time with Christine's daughter Sam, who was about the same age as Kira.
Sam still has great memories of her time spent with Molly and Kira through the years, especially those reunions where they'd stay in cabins and swim and kayak on the lake. Sam remembers the friendship her mom Christine shared with Molly.
Sam describes the two as being like best friends growing up. Over time, though, Molly became more withdrawn. As Molly got older, Sam explained, she faced a number of personal issues, and she began to struggle with her mental well-being, which was difficult not only to witness firsthand, but also to hear about from other family members. Despite being a kind and caring person, Molly often lacked self-worth and didn't seem to recognize the positive qualities in herself that others saw so clearly. According to Sam, Molly was also quite impressionable, which made her more vulnerable during that time. And then in the late 90s, Molly decided it was time to make a new life for herself. So she packed her things and moved across the country to Sunnyvale, California. Because she had been so young when she had Kira, Molly wanted to get a sense of who she was as an adult and felt like a move to somewhere new might give her some more perspective on her life as an adult. Kira stayed back east when Molly moved, living with her grandmother, Chris. Since Christine and Sam lived in the Bay Area, they were able to see Molly from time to time, who had 2 jobs, one as a florist and the other at a mystery house. But as time passed in Sunnyvale, Molly began to seclude herself more and more, not wanting to hang out as much as she used to. Sam felt the move in the 2 jobs had been a bit overwhelming for Molly, and that she might have been struggling with depression. In a recent exclusive interview, Sam reflected on this, explaining, "A lot of the family, from my understanding, did try to help. Invite her to things, kind of pull her out of it. But she'd almost act like things were completely fine. But you could tell something was different. I think she might have been depressed or something like that. Or maybe she didn't feel good enough, perhaps."
But despite this change in behavior from Molly, she always showed up for work on time, and she would check in at least once a week with Kira and Chris back home.
In mid-January of 2013, Molly found herself somewhat down on her luck, unable to get ahead financially, and still dealing with her mental health issues. She moved out of the apartment she'd been living in for the last 5 years and began renting a room from 52-year-old Glenn Griggs, who was living about a block away from her old apartment at 498 North Fair Oaks Avenue. The home was actually owned by Glenn's uncle Robert, who was a Sunnyvale public safety officer. Robert employed Glenn as a handyman. Although Molly kept up her regular calls back home to check in on Kira, she never told them about the new move, nor did she mention her new landlord, Glenn Griggs. As far as her family knew, she was still living alone in her old apartment. At this point, Molly wasn't aware of just what kind of person Glenn Griggs was. She had no knowledge that Griggs had a violent criminal record in multiple states dating back to the 1980s. In fact, according to a report from the district attorney, in 1980, Glenn and a friend were charged with the first-degree murder of a 6-year-old boy in Florida. Glenn's friend confessed to strangling the boy inside a mobile home, while Glenn insisted his only part in the crime was digging a hole under the trailer, where the boy's body was later found. But because he agreed to testify against his friend, Glenn was convicted of the lesser charge of accessory after the fact and was placed on probation for 5 years. It didn't seem like Molly knew Glenn very well at all. When Molly spoke to friends about Glenn, she didn't mention him by name, only referring to him as the guy I'm renting my room from or my landlord. It wasn't long before Molly became uncomfortable with her new living situation. She told multiple friends that Glenn was weird and that she didn't like sleeping in the same house as him. She would often stay at friends' places to avoid being around Glenn. Molly's fear of Glenn escalated the longer she lived in the house. She told one friend that she was constantly worried, saying that he, quote, scared the shit out of her and that she didn't want her friend to forget in case something happened to her. She said that Glenn was often intoxicated and she would hear him talking to himself about torturing people. And then at one point, she even told friends she was afraid to go back home because she feared he might be capable of sexually assaulting and killing her. Glenn had bragged to Molly about murdering a woman and dumping her body in the Sunnyvale landfill, and that he was wild in the eyes when he told her the story, something he claimed to have enjoyed. Molly felt like she had to sleep with one eye open when she was at home, knowing that the man who lived in the same house as her was capable of this kind of violence. Then on March 9th, 2013, Molly called back east to wish her mom a happy birthday. But on that call, Molly didn't indicate that she was having a problematic living situation, or even that the person she was living with had her fearing for her life. By Molly's disposition on the call, Molly's mom, Chris, thought everything was okay with her. But after that call, no one heard from Molly again. And by March 13th, Molly's cell phone was no longer in service, and she hadn't cashed a check that her mom had sent her. 1 week later, on March 20th, Molly's friend John went to Molly's house to drop in and see how she was doing. She wasn't there, but Glenn Griggs was. And according to John, when he asked Glenn where Molly was, Glenn threatened to break his legs and refused to give John any details about Molly's whereabouts.
Because of this encounter and his worry for Molly's well-being, John called the police and asked them to stop by and do a wellness check on Molly. Officers were dispatched to Molly's house, and when they asked about Molly, Glenn let them look inside his home, but they didn't find her.
When Paige and I started the Murder Diaries, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setup, recording schedule, logos. It was super overwhelming, and every day seemed to introduce a new decision that needed an answer now. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Skims and Rhode to brands just getting started. Get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand's style. You can accelerate your content creation because Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. Easily create email and social media campaigns wherever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing returns and beyond. If you're ready to sell, you're ready for Shopify. Turn your big business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/murderdiaries. Go to shopify.com/murderdiaries. That's shopify.com/murderdiaries.
I'm Cindy Lauper. My psoriasis was all over, even on my scalp, which may mean 4 times the risk for psoriatic arthritis. But Cosentyx works on both.
Cosentyx secukinumab is prescribed for adults with moderate to severe plaque psoriasis 300 milligram dose and adults with active psoriatic arthritis 150 milligram dose. Don't use if you're allergic to Cosentyx. Before starting, get checked for tuberculosis. An increased risk of infections and lowered ability to fight them may occur, like tuberculosis or other serious bacterial, fungal, or viral infections. Some are fatal. Tell your doctor if you have an infection or symptoms like fevers, sweats, chills, muscle aches, or cough, had a vaccine or plan to, or if inflammatory bowel disease symptoms develop or worsen. Serious allergic reactions and severe eczema-like skin reactions may occur. Learn more at Cosentyx.com or 1-844-COSENTYX. Ask your doctor about Cosentyx.
Acura's all-new ADX, a compact SUV that isn't just built for one thing, it's precision crafted for everything. To escape the grind with available all-wheel drive. To go with your flow with available Google built-in.
Hey Google, turn it up.
Okay, turning up the volume. And crafted to be heard with an available Bang & Olufsen premium sound system. The all-new Acura ADX, crafted to match your energy. Acura, precision crafted performance.
Take your vibes and go, 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 go.
Google is a trademark of Google LLC.
The Sunnyvale police knew all about Glenn Griggs and his string of violent offenses. His criminal record included DUI, battery of police officer, and resisting arrest. Griggs had a record for several hostile encounters with police officers. During one arrest, Glenn told officers that he had AIDS, HIV, and hepatitis C, and then threatened to bite them. During another arrest, Griggs had set up booby traps in his house, including a blowtorch device above a door frame that would burn anyone who walked through the door. And then there were the deaths of 3 of Griggs' girlfriends. In an arrest affidavit, Detective Alan Harnett stated that Glenn, quote, has a repeated pattern of being present or associated with dead white females who have problems with alcohol. The first of these deaths happened in 2003, when 38-year-old Evelyn Jordan died in the Tuolumne County, California home that she shared with Griggs. Glenn was the one who reported her death, and the cause was determined to be that of natural causes. However, Evelyn had a blood alcohol content of 0.31, more than 3 times the legal limit. Glenn had a history of abuse with Evelyn. About a year before her death, he was arrested for a felony count of infliction of corporal injury. Police took photos of 9 bruises on Evelyn's body. Charges were dismissed in May of 2003. Then in 2005, Glenn's 48-year-old girlfriend Beverly Donaldson also died. Glenn told the police that he had been out on a walk and found Beverly dead in their bed when he returned home. Again, Glenn was the one who reported the death. Her cause of death was determined to be accidental acute ethanol intoxication. And in 2006, 50-year-old Kelly Rose Daniel died. The East Bay Times reported that Kelly was a homeless woman who had lived with and dated Glenn Griggs in the months before her death. This third death was investigated as a suspicious homicide. Kelly's body had been found in a garbage dump on September 5th, 2006. And I want to take a moment here to remind our audience. Remember when Molly told her friends about Glenn claiming to have killed a woman and then dumping her body in the Sunnyvale landfill? Glenn told police that the last time he had seen Kelly was on September 1st, 2006 at his home. Her cause of death was undetermined, but a blood alcohol level had been determined to be 0.246, which is 2.5 times above the legal limit. Her death was ruled an unattended death since it couldn't be determined how or when she received the injuries that caused her death. By March 22nd of 2013, Molly's daughter was beginning to feel uneasy about the lack of contact with her mom. The last time she'd spoken with her was on the 9th, and 9 days had passed since Molly's cell phone service had been shut off. So Kira called the Sunnyvale police and asked them to do a welfare check on her mom. She told the police her silence wasn't typical for Molly. Her mom had always been so good about checking in, and there'd been no issues within the family that would have made Molly intentionally cut off communication with them. So police once again visited Glenn Griggs' home. And again, with Glenn's permission, they searched the house. And for a second time, there was no trace of Molly. Glenn told police that Molly was fine, and she wasn't contacting her family because she'd had a falling out with them, which was a direct contradiction to what Kira had told the police about Molly's relationship with the family being as strong as ever. At this point, Molly's family knew something was definitely wrong, so they filed a missing persons report for her. But it was well over a month before the police finally entered Molly into their missing persons database. They'd also failed to submit her name and description to local media in those critical weeks after she was last seen. The police clearly knew about Glenn's violent history and the highly suspicious deaths of women he'd been associated with. So, why had they been so lackluster in trying to find out what happened to her? This angered and confused Sam. She felt like she and her family were doing way more to try and find Molly than the police were. Molly's sister Abby and her cousin Christine had essentially dropped everything to try and locate her, but they were getting almost zero help. So Abby flew to Sunnyvale to do her own investigating. It was in California where Abby teamed up with Sam's mom, Christine, and together they began looking into what really happened to Molly. Abby visited both of Molly's workplaces, and she found out that Molly hadn't been to work in weeks. Again, this kind of behavior was against type for Molly. She'd always been so responsible and conscientious. Abby also visited the apartment building she thought Molly had been living at, and was surprised when the landlord told her that Molly had moved out months ago, back in January. Nobody was sure why Molly had kept the family in the dark about her living situation. The East Bay Times later reported that Molly had been evicted from the apartment, but Molly's family had never been aware of that information. It was through Molly's friends that Abby learned that Molly had gone to live with Glenn Griggs, and that she'd been afraid for her life shortly before she disappeared. Abby and Christine began looking into Griggs. They wanted to know, who was this strange man that Molly had found herself living with before she disappeared? It didn't take long for them to learn all about Glenn and his violent past, which only made them more concerned about Molly's safety. While Abby was in town searching for Molly, Molly's friend John was still trying to find her as well. On May 8th, 2013, nearly 2 months after Molly was last seen, John requested yet another welfare check. The police arrived for a third time at Glenn's home, although this time he wouldn't let them inside. Instead, he only spoke to them from behind a metal security door. Glenn told them, yes, Molly still lived at his house, but she wasn't home at the moment. He also told them that Molly had gotten a new cell phone to avoid contact with her family. When the police asked him for Molly's new number, Griggs refused to give it to them. He also told the police that Molly had recently bought a Toyota Prius. But when the police looked into this, they found no Prius registered in Molly's name and never saw a Prius parked near Glenn's home.
2 days later, on May 10th, 2013, after 3 welfare checks and multiple pleas for help from Molly's family, the Sunnyvale police finally listed Molly as a missing person on the California Department of Justice Missing Persons website.
The following day, the police were called back to Glenn's house. But this time, it was unrelated to Molly's disappearance. He had gotten into an altercation with a passerby outside his home. While they were there, police inquired about Molly for a 4th time, and Glenn told them that Molly had been home the night before, but then left. When they asked him again for Molly's new number, Glenn told them that he didn't have it, which was inconsistent with what he had told them on their last visit. On July 3rd, 2013, the police deployed surveillance cameras outside of Glenn's home and kept them rolling for nearly a month. At no point was Molly or her new Prius captured on camera. On July 31st, police returned to Glenn's home once again. This time, Glenn told police that Molly had moved to Southern California in order to take a temporary job at a nursery. He said she traveled back to Sunnyvale once a week, and that Molly had been to the house the previous weekend. According to the DA report, he said to police officers, quote, "Anyone concerned about Molly should know she's doing fine and is very happy." He also told them that he and Molly had been very much so in a relationship for 1.5 to 2 years, and they were focused on their new life together. It's important to point out that the only time it was ever suggested that Glenn Griggs and Molly were in a relationship was at that moment. And the person saying it was Griggs. There's no proof that what he was saying was even true. She'd never mentioned him to her family, and if you recall, when talking about Griggs to her friends, Molly never even mentioned his name. She only referred to him as, quote, "the guy I'm renting from," or "my landlord." At no time did she ever indicate that she and Glenn were in a romantic relationship. Meanwhile, Molly's friends and family were doing everything they could to find her. They hired a private investigator, submitted DNA samples, and frequently followed up with police for any new tips or leads. But unfortunately, there was no sign of Molly anywhere in Sunnyvale. During this time, Glenn was still exhibiting strange behavior. In August, police responded to a 911 call after Glenn had harmed himself. When they arrived at his home, Griggs had cuts on his wrist. And while they were there, police asked about Molly. Glenn said that he'd been in touch with her, that she continued to work at the nursery in Southern California, and that she had visited. But police could find no evidence that any of this was true. Then in October, officers responded to yet another 911 call from Glenn's home. This time, a very drunk Griggs told police that he'd been stabbed. There were cuts on his legs, arms, and throat. He said that 3 men had attacked him, but he was unable to describe them. He also said that he had called Molly and told her about his injuries. And when officers asked for her number, he wouldn't give it to them. And suddenly, in November of 2013, another tragedy befell the Franquemont family. Molly's mother, Chris, passed away unexpectedly. And the fact that Molly didn't show up to her mother's funeral was just more proof to her family that something wasn't right. Molly's relationship with her mother had always been very strong.
Also, Molly's daughter Kira had been staying with Chris. It made no sense that Molly wouldn't come home to be with her daughter during this unexpected tragedy if she absolutely could.
Police continued investigating Molly's disappearance, and by early June of 2014, more than a year after she had been last seen, they were investigating her case as a homicide. On June 2nd, 2014, an arrest warrant was issued for Glenn Griggs for the murder of Molly Anne Franquemont. In addition to the arrest warrant, the judge also signed a search warrant for Glenn's residence. Because police were aware of Glenn's track record of hostility, threats, and violence toward law enforcement, investigators put their heads together to figure out the best plan of action on how exactly to deliver the warrants. They wanted to avoid biting and booby traps at all costs. So on June 5th, 2014, at 8:14 a.m., 2 police detectives arrived at Glenn Griggs' home to serve him the arrest warrant. To say things didn't go well would be an understatement. Glenn opened the door of his home, threatening the police detectives with what looked to be a long rifle. The detectives drew their weapons, and Glenn was shot 5 times. But when officers approached Glenn and removed his gun, it wasn't a rifle at all, but a Marlin Cowboy Lamb 350 .177 caliber BB gun. Glenn was transported to the hospital but was pronounced dead on arrival. Toxicology blood tests showed that Griggs had a toxic amount of methamphetamine in his system, and the shooting was later ruled as justified on the part of the police detectives. After Glenn's death, police showed his neighbors photos of Molly to see if someone, had seen her around in recent weeks or months. But nobody could say if they had seen her or not. One neighbor told police that Glenn frequently brought women from the homeless shelter to his house, and that Molly's photo looked similar to the type of women he would bring home. Sunnyvale police also spoke to Glenn's brother, Robert, the person who owned the home that Glenn had lived in. Robert said, "Glenn has a weird thing for picking up girls that aren't well." He further stated that Glenn even had one girl, quote, die on him, or another whom Glenn was suspected of killing got, quote, kidnapped or something. Robert didn't believe his brother hurt any of these individuals. In fact, he also told police that Glenn had told him about his girlfriend Molly, and he knew that Glenn had refused to talk to police about her. Robert said he knew that his brother could be a pain in the and not a very cooperative guy. But Robert doesn't believe that means Glenn killed any of his girlfriends, including Molly. In fact, Robert was frustrated that police would even think that he was capable of something like that. It was only after Glenn Griggs was gunned down in the doorway of his home that the media began to report on Molly's disappearance. More than a year had passed since anyone had seen her, and the police had effectively done little to nothing to help her family find out what happened to her. To this day, Sam is still frustrated with how the Sunnyvale police handled Molly's case. Reflecting on the mishandling of the investigation, Sam said, "It just was handled very grossly because that seemed like the bigger thing to them. Oh, a man was shot by the police. Not, he was shot by the police and he's killed multiple people and one of them is still missing."
Within a month of Glenn's death, the media had dropped the story, no longer reporting on either Glenn or Molly. In fact, it would be 3 years after Molly's disappearance until the DA's office actually addressed their belief that Glenn Griggs was responsible for Molly's disappearance and the justified shooting that resulted in Glenn's death. The document makes it clear that the police suspected Glenn murdered Molly and that they were at his home to arrest him for that murder.
When the family was asked where the case stands today, Sam said the following: "As far as we're all aware, the case is basically nowhere. I think the case ended the day that Griggs was killed. I think that was a complete dead end, full stop. Because that was their one and only suspect, understandably so. I mean, every single sign points to the guy. We all think it was this guy. The police have our DNA or Abby's DNA. They have any resource we could possibly give them. They have had it for 10 years. I don't know if they even consider this an ongoing case, or maybe they consider it ongoing, just for technical reasons, but there aren't any new leads that we're aware of or anything like that." Sam also reflected on what she thinks happened to Molly and how she wound up in Glenn Griggs' twisted orbit. She explained that Molly, being a kind and genuine person, was easily manipulated, though not through any fault of her own. Sam believes that Molly got caught up in a situation where she felt unsafe, and like the two women before her, Molly became a victim. While Molly didn't have the substance abuse issues the other women had, Sam feels that Griggs was more careful with her, likely to avoid leaving behind any evidence that would point to foul play. Ultimately, Sam believes Molly was killed by Griggs, and that he was more successful in hiding the truth of what happened to her. Although Molly's body has never been located, many of her friends and family have found a kind of closure, as much as that kind of thing can be arrived at when a loved one disappears into thin air and is never heard from again. Sam explained that although most of the family feels confident they know what happened and have come to terms with Molly's disappearance, she still struggles with the lack of answers. While others have moved forward, she continues to feel unsettled, frustrated even, by the constant reminders of Glenn Griggs' name without any trace of Molly's. The unresolved nature of her disappearance continues to haunt Sam, making it difficult to find peace. What Sam and her family want most is for the focus to remain on Molly, on who she was, the fact that she's still missing, and the lives impacted by her disappearance. They believe the story shouldn't revolve around the man believed to be responsible, but rather on the women whose lives were cut short by his actions. For them, it's about honoring the victims, not the violence. Though so much remains unknown, there's still hope that someone out there holds a piece of the truth, and that one day it might come to light. With that in mind, before we wrap up today's episode, we'd like to quote Molly's sister, Abby. Something she wants the world to know about her sister. Here's what she had to say. Molly was smart and funny, and she loved so very, very deeply. She worked hard and she tried hard, and even when she didn't succeed, she never just quit. She took a lot of hard knocks in her life, and she always got back up and kept going. And she deserves to be remembered not as a victim, but as a living woman who was a daughter, sister, friend, and more. Molly Anne Franquemont was last heard from around March 13th, 2013. At the time, she was 38 years of age, 5'3" tall, and 110 pounds. Molly has brown hair and brown eyes. She has a tattoo of a bird on her hip. Anyone with information on Molly's disappearance or her whereabouts can call the Sunnyvale Department of Safety at 408-730-7101. That's 408-730-7101.
Make sure to follow us on all of our socials at The Murder Diaries Pod. And if you want to listen ad-free, head over to patreon.com/The Murder Diaries Pod. Until then,
Stay safe.
bye.